Okay, well, hey, thanks for tuning in, folks. Welcome to Gaming Garbage. We're taking a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today, we're doing a podcast. I met with another fellow gamer through one of my videos, and we're roughly about the same age, and we have generally a lot of the same experience. And we wanted to do a podcast to talk about kind of like what retro gaming was and kind of like how the progression has been through the gaming industry. And so I just have some questions written down here, and we'll take turns to answer the same question. And two, Dexter, feel free to interject anything as you think about it or whatever. This will be
Of
just
course.
kind of an open-ended podcast, but yeah, go ahead and tell us a little about yourself, about like what you've played, how long you've been playing, a favorite series maybe.
Okay, so my name's Dexsor, but my real name is Danny. I'm 33, and I've been playing games since I was about four. I started on a Sega Saturn, believe it or not, and I only ever played one game on it, and that was the original Tomb Raider, and that's kind of where everything really started, to be honest. And then I think it was about a year or so later, I think my parents brought me a PS1, and that was where I played. That was where my foundation started, so to speak. It was Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3, and 4, and original Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, Grand Theft Auto, all those kind of games. What I like to call proper games, because they just don't make them like they used to. But I think my favorite, it's difficult. I would have to go with perhaps Resident Evil is probably the best series of games I've ever played. But again, with time, I could have said Tomb Raider was my favorite. I could have said Resident Evil was my favorite. But with time, they all got worse. So the first three Resident Evils were phenomenal, and then the
Yeah.
first five Tomb Raiders were phenomenal, and then it just got progressively worse from there. So it's kind of a pattern. But if I had to pick one that I'd say sticks with me the most, I would probably say Resident Evil as a series, but as a solo game, I think Metal Gear Solid is unbeatable. I think it's a game that was 25 years ahead of its time. I think with modern graphics and control.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. That's a really good game to pick.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, my name that I go on here is Tread. My actual name is Jeremy. I'm 34 years old. I've been playing since about I was 3 or 4 years old. My family had an old Jimmy the Worm or something like that. Oh, I wish I could remember his name. I can't. Yeah, I
Jimmy
can't
the
remember his
Worm.
name. Yeah, I can see the cover art, but I can't remember the name.
Are you on
But
about
like,
worms?
yeah, there was Jim. Maybe his name was Jim. It was an old game, and yeah, the IP doesn't exist anymore. There's no, it haven't been games made by it for a long time. But yeah, I grew up on Donkey Kong a little bit. I grew up on um, Mario and Legend of Zelda, Metroid Prime, um, some sports games, and yeah, we had an NES and a Super Nintendo in the house. And then I remember the day that my oldest brother bought a PlayStation 1. And that was
Yeah.
really when gaming got started for me. Because, yeah, 3D graphics were like, oh my word, this is just like totally the future, next level kind of stuff, whatever. And the fact, too, that you could like cooperative play with people was just really fun, too. You know, you had two controller ports and you could just
Yep.
play. And then some of my friends had the N64, and so I got exposed to that. My first system was an Xbox. Um, or no, would have been a PlayStation 2. I actually
Two.
bought
Yeah.
that for myself. Bought a 3, bought a 4, also bought a 360 and a Xbox One, and now a Series X. And so I've kept up with gaming for quite a long time. I've always been interested too in reading magazines and playing games, and just that was something we talked about at school during lunch, was just talking about games all the time. And we had LAN parties, and so yeah, just a bunch of exposure to that. Never any tournaments, was never really good enough to do any of that, but I had some buddies too that were part of that. Went to a few of those just to watch them play. And gaming was really special, I feel like, in the 90s and 2000s. And then
Yes.
starting in 2010 is really when the business model started changing. And for me, that's been sad because we have entire generations now that just don't know what good storytelling is in a video game, except for maybe a few examples. My favorite multiplayer game probably was like Twisted Metal. Played a bunch of that
Wow.
with my brothers, and that was fun. And then yeah, my favorite story game is Metal Gear Solid. So you already stole my thunder on that one.
Absolutely. I
But
think it's
Metal Gear
hard for a lot of
Solid
people to
is,
disagree on that, though. I think it's
yeah,
very
it's
difficult for
such a
people to
good
disagree.
game. The
And I
the
mean,
character development and storytelling
yeah,
and everything and cinematics and just what was done with the hardware then, idea of just how to storytell.
yeah. Kojima was, again, I keep using the term ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time. He produced
Yeah.
perhaps the most genius video game I've ever seen, played, heard, whatever terminology you want to use. But um, just the voice acting alone. I mean, voice acting in the 90s wasn't great. Solid, even in the great Resident Evil and the great Resident Evil 2, the voice acting was terrible. But
Yeah.
Kojima, I think he got that spot on. It was perfect. And it's interesting to listen to your background of even in a different country how similar it was. I didn't start off as on as early of consoles as you, as like the NES and things like that, but in competitive Call of Duty and that kind of thing. But in terms of console range, we virtually went through the identical system.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah,
virtually
we
exactly
did.
the same. Yeah.
And again, just that ability of 3D gaming was just unbelievable. I mean, that was a
Well, we
true
we never thought
innovation.
it could get better. We thought when we saw
No.
this PS1, we thought, oh my God, these are so realistic. It's never ever going to improve.
Yeah. And I remember the PlayStation 2, and it was just like, what the frick? I remember just standing at Target, which is a retail store here, and just staring at the demo screen of somebody playing and just seeing the PlayStation 2 visuals. Or even
Yes.
just seeing trailers. Like they would play sometimes in TVs, like the camera sound or electronics section in a store, and you just stand there and watch trailers and be like, wow, that is all of the polygons in Snake's face for PlayStation 2
Yep.
is all of the polygons that were used for an entire character in on the PlayStation 1. So just the graphical increase of all of the polygons that were used to make textures and curves and shadows and all of that stuff was just many times above of what it was, and we just had these massive leaps. And then too, with better hardware, they could immersify people, the players, better too into the game and give them better experiences or make it bigger. And it wasn't just graphical quality; it was also audio. It was also
Yep.
being able to add more movements and animations, or even just more gear. Um, like I remember sniping actually through the scope was like a
Yes.
big deal because you didn't have a scope to look through really. And one that really I think did a great job at that was James Bond Golden Eye.
Medal of Honor
and
on the original PS1 as well.
and then yeah, Medal of Honor was another one. Yeah, people don't even
Yeah.
know what Medal of Honor is. Gal,
No.
that's so depressing. You don't even see that one anymore. It's still owned by somebody, but
Absolutely.
yeah, everything is just so consolidated today. So yeah, the question I'll start, folks, usually with a podcast interview kind of like this is, we'll start with a generally the same question after introductions is, what is your overall thoughts of the gaming industry?
As in now or in the past?
Yeah, of just kind of like where it is today, and it doesn't have to be
Um,
super detailed, but just kind of like you hear the word gaming industry, like what do you think of?
I think It's definitely took a turn for the worst. It's You'd think with the advancements in technology that things could only get better, and in certain aspects, I believe that's true. So graphically, frame rate, sound, voice acting, yes, it's definitely better than it's probably ever been, in my opinion. But I feel that they are missing. I like to use the term the soul. There's no soul in these games anymore. There
Hmm.
are the odd exceptions, don't get me wrong. They've I will talk in the last 10 years, so let's say since about 2014, they've made The Evil Within 1 and 2, survival horror.
Hmm.
Where they pulled that from is incredible. It plays incredible, graphically it's incredible, but it has soul. It's got a story that grabs you and it entices you, and that's a nostalgic feel that it takes you back to the 90s. But I think that the problem nowadays is that companies know that we can release an online platform game, issue microtransactions, and people will pay for it. And that seems a lot easier than putting 2, 3, 4, 5 years of hard work into a decent story game. I think that they still make story games, but they kind of just force them out, and I don't think their soul and their heart is in it. Again, another one that came out not too long ago is Hogwarts Legacy. Now that was
Hmm.
phenomenal. That was a phenomenal game. They did incredible with that, and the sales for it were through the roof. So now and again, a company will get it right, but for all intents and purposes, the idea behind what they're doing now is wrong. And it gaming isn't as exciting as it used to be because what people love the most, you can talk about graphics till you're blue in the face, but people want to be engaged with the character. They want to feel like they are that person and they can relate to them. How would they feel in X, Y, or Z situation? And not so much anymore. And for me, that
Yeah.
is perhaps the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. For me personally, my overall thoughts of the gaming industry is that there's just so much trend chasing, and
Yes.
everything feels and plays the same. And this is actually one of the games coming out next month, Concord, put out by PlayStation. It's another 5v5 shooter, and they want you to pay $40 for the game up front, and then microtransactions on top of that. And it's like we already have 5v5 shooters, you know.
Yes.
Some are very close to what Concord is, just like Overwatch, and then other games are maybe taking a little bit of a different route, like the finals, where it's 3v3v3, or like Warzone, where it's just a bigger pool of people all free for alling, or with teams. Or same with Apex, or maybe something like really old school. Going back with that idea is Team Fortress 2. I mean, that game is like almost, I think we're getting close to like 20 years old now. And
Wow.
that idea has been around forever. And yeah, Team Fortress 2 was first a PC only game, and then it was later brought to 360. That you can play it on, and I don't think you can play it on anymore unless you actually have a physical disc, which those are incredibly hard to find now. But but yeah, just the gaming industry today is it's all just trend chasing. It's all about the money, and
Yes.
there's not really a immersive engagement with the players anymore. And instead, companies are thinking about how they can get more money instead of actually creating a better experience.
Agreed.
And that in turn would bring more money. The game that I think of that has done really well in bringing the user experience is like Elden Ring, and that was released in 2022 in February, and they've sold 25 million copies. They've made a ton of their money back, but just the sheer amount of content in that game is like two or three other games put together, and it was
Yes.
$60. And it's like you get $60 for all of that content. I'm still on my first playthrough, folks. I'm playing through the DLC right now, and I'm at 467 hours, and
Wow.
I still haven't beat it. Like there's so much in it out now. To be fair, I am playing with Lion Chaser. Some of you Probably have seen him on the channel, and we play co-op games together, and we've been playing through Elden Ring, the DLC, and been having a lot of fun with that. And so whatever I do in my game, we also do in his. But if you roughly cut that time in half, we're still looking at about 250 hours of just running through my game. Uh,
Uh, and in
and not
comparison
running
to a story
through
game of
his.
today, just sorry to interrupt, in
Oh, go ahead.
comparison, so like most story games, you can do that, like the Call of Duty campaign, it can be done in under 6 hours.
Oh yeah, the whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and so what they do is they focus again, as I've just said, the online side of things is their only interest now.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't see it. I see a market and a place for online gaming. Absolutely, I don't think it shouldn't exist. The microtransactions need to be nerfed and or stopped, because
yeah,
online the rise of online gaming came from Call of Duty 4 in 2007 and Halo. Now, Call of Duty 4 didn't have microtransactions, neither did Halo, and they are probably two of the most online game played games ever. Call of Duty 4 was it just blew the whole thing out of proportion, and sorry, the only microtransactions that were quote unquote available were map packs, but that was what
yeah.
10, 10,
DLCs.
10 about £10 like once a year, and
Yeah,
that to me was the pinnacle of it. And when it started to change was in Black Ops 2. They started releasing skins at £1.50 a piece for your guns,
mm,
and everybody just tagged on to this idea. And from 2014, 15 onwards, it's just gone crazy. It's the money that can be spent on microtransactions, and they design it in a way, especially FIFA. FIFA, you kind of have to, unless you put your life and soul into that game and you play 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so you can do all the objectives and grind all the different things to keep up to date. You ain't going to do it. So what they do is they make it so you can't get the best players. So you have to spend money on packs to be able to potentially get the best players. And these packs, you can buy 12,000 points for £80, which is probably around $95. And
yeah.
that will last you approximately 2 minutes.
It's disgusting. It. Yeah, that's that's awful.
Yeah.
And two, it's like for those of you that are younger and don't know, the season pass used to be something else
Yes.
compared to what it is today. Okay, so
Mm.
like we had DLC, and then the idea was like, look, we will make 4 or 5 DLCs, and if you want them, just buy them all together for a small discount.
Yes.
Normally, the equivalent of buying them all was $60, and you could get it all in a bundle called a season pass for 50. And so I did that with Battlefields. I did that with some of the CODs, and other companies started following that trend too. With just like, yeah, we are dedicating this many DLCs. Um, and the DLCs generally maybe had a little bit of extra story in the beginning, but again, the main focus was multiplayer, the map packs, and more guns maybe, or whatever
Correct.
else. And now it's just completely shifted over to not any more storytelling. It's just all extra skins and stuff. And this also
Absolutely.
brings another issue of just the file size of these games, because I
Oh,
don't know
wow.
if you guys realize is Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War is 220 gigs, the game.
Yes, it
And
is.
I'm not even kidding. Like it's literally insane. And what you're paying for partly, or what you're installing partly, is again going from 1080p to 4K. So that's
Yeah.
4 times the resolution. That's definitely going to take up some space. But you're also paying, or excuse me, you're also downloading all of the microtransactions that you haven't even paid for yet.
Correct.
And when we get these updates or the new season, you're downloading all of the microtransactions. And then when you buy one, instead of having to download it like it used to be, you pay for it, you downloaded it like in 360 or PlayStation 3, and and it was fine. But now you're downloading everything, so that way when you buy it or unlock it or get it, it's available right away. There is no downloading. So you're literally downloading dozens of gigs of just all of the microtransactions that most of us are probably never going to have. And then we're wondering why all of these games are, especially these live service ones, are so big, and that's why. They're
And to
huge.
follow on from that, what people, the younger generation, probably don't even realize is Black Ops 1, Modern Warfare 2, older game, any game from, around the 2009 era, there was no such thing as install. We ran it off a disk.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
none of this massive install time. Yes, they released updates now and again, that's true. But they weren't 30 gig updates. They were like a gig at most. You know,
Yeah.
some people I know don't have the greatest internet connections in the world, and they'll come home from work one day and they'll turn on their Call of Duty or they'll turn on their FIFA, and it says 10 hours until update is installed because it's like 30 gig in size.
Yeah, it's
And all these
huge.
people want to do is just hop on for an hour or two after work, and it's not kind of possible anymore.
No.
And with the technology today, you think it would automatically do it for you. Maybe if you leave your consoles in rest mode, it would do it for you, but it doesn't. And I think that's something that should be implemented, in
Yeah,
my
some of
opinion.
the updates are too big
Yes,
for
they
that.
are.
I've noticed that too. With some of my games with bigger updates, generally when I start getting to 20 or 25 gigs for the update, I have to manually do those. The
Yes,
smaller ones, they go through just fine. But yeah, for the bigger ones, they don't always automatically update, and that's incredibly frustrating. Because then, yeah, you're sitting there and you're waiting, and it's like it's not a better user experience. And I guess I would just say too, with just the overall gaming industry today, it's a worse user experience all
agreed.
around. That's probably
Agreed.
the best way to put it. It's
Yes.
just awful.
But even a shorter period of time, not let's not go from the 90s or the 2000s to present day. I will give you an example from 2017 to today. That's only a 7 year window. FIFA 17 played, performed, menu systems, usability was better than the current FIFA of today because it was more
Mm.
simplistic.
Mm.
It seems to
Y-
be that they're overcomplicating everything.
yeah, you could have fun with a game back then.
Agreed.
And I think that is probably the most basic word we could use to describe what's missing is fun.
Mm. Mm.
I
Definitely,
mean
I agree.
that's actually my next question is, what is missing in gaming today? And yeah,
Um,
it's
it's
fun.
fun. Yeah, and again, I'll bring it up again. Story,
Yeah.
story, and that is it's the paramount of what we do. You want to listen to the backstory. You want to learn about the character as you progress through the story. More characters come into it, and you learn about them and what they're all about and why they're important to the plot. And that's the fascinating part about it. And that is just it's not there. It's like I said, there have been a
No.
few exceptions, and that's great. But for the most part, it's just not there. And I'll be truthful, I don't believe it will ever return
Mm.
because I don't believe enough time and money is invested into that side of things.
Yeah, because it ultimately doesn't make enough compared to the microtransactions that today. Like I remember reading about Monopoly Go is a mobile game, that's
Yes.
free, and in 10 months it made $2 billion. And I mean the team working on those games, there's a few dozen people making the game, so very low overhead, and then
Yes.
the amount of money they're pulling from making a game that everybody can play, where there's really no skill level. It's just a bunch of chance and probabilities, and then the microtransactions are a dollar or a few bucks or $5, and yeah, they made $2 billion in 10 months.
Mm,
Like that is extremely profitable.
mm.
Or even too thinking of like,
Like Fortnite, it's free,
yeah,
but
it's another
you've
free
got
game, and
you've got all the DLC and the microtransactions that come with it.
yeah, they've made
Um,
billions off of that game.
and they've made billions. It's I mean, you have to admire them. It's genius. It's genius marketing and it's
It
genius
is.
business. But that doesn't make it okay. Gaming for
No.
me, I think it used to be an entertainment thing for companies to produce and be proud of what they do. I think nowadays they're just businesses. I think it's just all about how much money can we make for the least amount of work possible.
Yeah. And I'd say too, what's missing is the characters. Um, and part of that storytelling, like we will never have, staying on the track of Call of Duty, we'll never have another Captain Price. We'll
No.
never have another Soap.
No.
Like we will never have those characters, or
You're bringing tears to
Ma-
my eyes now a little
yeah,
bit.
Makarov. Like we'll
Makarov.
never have those characters. Yeah,
No.
or
No.
like Kratos. God, I remember
Kratos.
the original God of War games, folks. Like they were
Wow.
amazing platformers, and it's like, wow, this is Kratos, and why he's like super pale white, and his
Yeah.
curse that he has, and this journey of just going through what he's going through as a character, and through all three of those games, and I enjoy and like um, the reboots of
Yes, they
God
are.
of
They are
War,
good. They are
and
good.
they are pretty good, but to me they still don't quite hit as hard
No.
with some of the craziness you went through in the original God of War games. Even a
Yes.
game like Shadow of the Colossus, where there's almost no talking or anything like that, I think that has a heck of a lot more heart and soul in the game than most games that are put out today. And it's just you on a horse riding around taking down monsters so you can basically save your girlfriend or your sister. I forget which she is. But again, there's no dialogue in the game. There's like a total of 20 words maybe. Um, and it's all about fighting evil of the land, but like as you're running through the world on your horse Anna, you're seeing the destruction of the land. You're seeing how it's depraved and how it's just not like what it once used to be. And while you're feeling heartbroken about that, your main goal again is just to save the girl. And it is quite a fun journey. And like they remastered that thing like 3 times, and I feel like if they did it again for PlayStation 5, woo, Shadow of the Colossus, let's buy it. Like they would again, they would make money. And but yeah, like they just do such a good job of storytelling and making those characters.
And the proof in what you're saying as well. And I think I do feel a little bit sorry for companies nowadays. And it's rare that I sympathize with them, but I think it's the same with the film industry. They're running out of ideas. There isn't really a lot more they can do that's original anymore. So, it's like films. We've had alien films, we've had war films, we've had films about everything. So what are
Lord
they
of the
supposed to
Rings.
Lord of the Rings. So what are they supposed to do? And I feel the same as with the gaming industry. What more can they make? And that's why they have remastered the original Resident Evils because they were groundbreaking. That's why they've remastered the Tomb Raiders because they are groundbreaking.
Hmm.
This is no coincidence that they're doing this. They're doing it
No.
because this is how games were supposed to be made. And that, for me, is all the proof that's needed is that you wouldn't remaster something that was bad. Why would you do
Yeah.
that? You only
Yeah,
remaster
you
something
wouldn't.
that was
It'd be a
good.
waste of money.
Exactly. And I think that Kojima was onto something as well. He was going to remaster the original Silent Hill. Now, if you've ever played that game, it's
Yeah,
terrifying.
long
The
time ago.
story's
It is
incredible.
terrifying.
And it's so unique. And Kojima was in the process of doing it before everything went wrong, and it's no longer happening, which is unfortunate. However, they are remaking
Right.
Silent Hill 2,
Yeah.
um, but there's a reason they're remastering these games, and one is that they know how good these games are and that people want to
Hmm.
play them, and B, I just don't think they've got any ideas anymore, and I don't think that's their fault. I just think that there's nothing really left to do anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I
Maybe
would
that's
say
the case.
too, like part of the industry, the reason they're doing all these remasters is because they're selling nostalgia now, and they know it makes money, and that's easier than coming up with a think tank to completely create a new IP, new story, new characters, all of this stuff. And like this is how I appreciate, why I appreciate From Software that made the Dark Souls games is, they have spent the last decade plus making a lot of these games, and then we got Elden Ring,
Yeah.
and you don't it's designed in a way where you don't have to know what's going on, but if you want to, it's all there. Um, and there's, I think it's uh, Smog, Smog something on YouTube. I can't remember the last piece of it, but he has a video of it's like 10 hours of lore of just that game, just the base game. And like
Yeah.
there's so much going on in that game. And the fact that they made Elden Ring in 8 years is pretty flippin'
Wow.
insane. Because again, it's like they've probably worked on some of the concept art maybe before that, but again, it's like just the sheer amount, and you can go all the way to like New Game Plus 7 and just level up to like 600 whatever, and you still get your ass beat all over. It really doesn't matter what your level is; you just suck at the game. Most of us do anyway, and but like again, it's the experience that you're going through as
Mm.
somebody in this world, and it's just portrayed so good. But like the other companies, I don't think they know how to make these games anymore. um,
No.
and something too that I don't think is ever talked about on another channel is the sheer number of retirements that we've had. And there
Yes.
have been so many people that have retired. We've literally had tens of millions folks retire in the last 4 years and across all industries. But since we're talking about just gaming, we've also had a lot of retirements there too. And these are the people, the brainchilds of making all of these IPs that we love, like Gears of War and Metal Gear Solid and Tomb Raider and Red Dead Redemption and all of these games. And now we have a whole new batch of people, and they grew up in a different generation, and they don't know how to tell stories. I
No.
think that's the problem, and I think the only
Mm.
way out of it is being able to practice. And what I appreciate about Larian Studios that made Baldur's Gate 3 or From Software that made Elden Ring, is that they still have old people making these games.
Yep.
And that's why they're good, is because again it's the head director that's guiding the rest of the team to make these experiences and tell these stories. But again, once we have an entire deprivation and the new amount of uh, what's the word, talent, if you could call it that, I guess, come in, that's just going to disappear because again all they know is making these live service games. It's like, oh, we don't tell a story like Captain Price in Call of Duty. We just make more microtransactions, and there needs to be an environment for the devs. I would hate being a dev now. Oh my gosh! But like, there needs to be an environment now for these devs to actually take some risk and to practice this skill of storytelling, because they can only remaster so much stuff, and then what? How in the world are most of these companies going to survive? Because we already have Ubisoft, Square Enix, and several others, or like Embracer Group or Take Two Interactive. Uh, some of them really aren't doing very well. Even Bungie now, they just had a whole bunch of layoffs, and like the revenue is not there, and they need to create a product that's worth $70, and they don't know how to do that
No.
because if you know, lockdowns were a mess for the world, and it messed up everybody's life some, and every industry. But again, it's like, okay, how many years do you need now to actually come back and start making good games again? And again, what we don't remember is that so many people just like, nope, I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to retire. And so there's been this huge brain drain, I think, um, of these people that have been telling these stories for a few decades, and now they're all done. And it's really scary because it's, yeah, what's next? Like,
And and
is
I
there
think to add
anything?
to and I think to add to that, which is really interesting, is that when you talk about these companies that aren't, doing so well, and what frustrates me the most, and it might be a personal view of mine, but I have read a few forums and things like that, and people seem to be of the same view as me. One of the companies that was getting it right and hitting the nail on the head has recently gone bust, and that's Tango, who created The Evil
Yeah.
Within. And I don't understand it because to me, they were the only one getting it right. And they now no longer exist, and that is really sad. That means that we may potentially never see the Evil Within 3, and the fans are crying
Hmm.
out for it. And when the fans are crying out for something, that means you're doing something right. Me personally, I couldn't care if they never made another FIFA or they never made another Call of Duty
Oh,
because
I
they're not
know.
getting it. They're not getting it right anyway. And
No.
so, but when the fans are crying out for something, they were doing something right. But Microsoft made the decision that Tango needs to go. And so I don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
You have more of an idea on this side of things than I do. I don't really look into the background like you do, all the different companies and that kind of thing. But I did read about Tango, and that was quite distressing for me because if they're not careful, who's going to be left?
Yeah.
It's a
And it
scary
is
thought.
really disheartening because
Mm.
you even have Tango Gameworks that made Hi-Fi Rush, and that was Game of the Year for
Mm.
23. And
Yeah.
it's like, what? Who's safe anymore? And,
Yes.
I don't think these AAA companies that have massive budgets that are too big for their britches, I don't think they understand that they need to preserve talent in the company and they need to think about the sustainability of their company, not from a financial standpoint, but as a creative standpoint.
Agreed.
Because some of
Agreed.
these layoffs too are just like, are you kidding me? Like the original creator of like Diablo, like he's fired now. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
And or like some of the concept artists for some of these other big IPs that have been going for decades. It's like, okay, like I really hope you guys know what you're doing because I'll be honest, I don't want a Gen Z or in some cases a millennial to take over for the creative side of some of these games because we're not very good at it. We got used to just cell phones and internet and social media, and it's like
Yeah.
we don't have the developed skills to storytell. I mean, if
Or the
if
brain power. The brain power is
yeah,
the biggest problem. Yeah. These people grew up in a time before the internet. People read books. People were more intelligent back then, in my opinion, because
hmm,
what we do, people say, well, information's more accessible now through the internet, but people don't choose to look at it. So
no,
most people sit there scrolling TikTok for 4 hours. That's what people do. But back, but
yeah,
back, but back then, people read books and they learned and they educated themselves. And by reading these books are stories. Stories get the brain working. Therefore, they can put these ideas into video games. And some of these games from back then are that good, they made films about them. That's how mind-blowing this is. What game that's come out in the past 10 years has had a film made about it? I don't know of one.
not any good ones. No.
No, I don't
Well,
know of
we'll be
any.
getting Borderlands later next month, but again, I don't
Oh,
think. Which I
okay.
will do a review of that one, folks. Stay tuned if I should let you know if you should waste your money or not. But I'm gonna review that one. But again, I don't have my hopes up because
Mm.
most of the adaptations haven't held true to the game lore. And I think a
Yes.
good example of that is Twisted Metal. They made a Twisted Metal TV show,
Mm.
and but it wasn't about the tournament of Twisted Metal. It was about Sweet Tooth. It's like,
And how does
that's
that make sense?
great, but it's like I don't want to know about. And they didn't even get his lore right either. So,
No.
or like Halo. There's a Halo TV show
Yep.
for 2 seasons, and they did an alternative timeline, and it was just so botched. It really just pissed me off. I mean,
Yep.
they screwed it so bad. Like Master Chief took his helmet off in the first episode, and it's like if that doesn't tell you how the rest of it is gonna go, like you're just not paying attention. And yeah, it was
Yeah.
horrible. It was bad. Um, but yeah, I'm
And
not
they
excited for these adaptations.
and they did Tomb Raider, didn't they? Back in the early 2000s, with
Hmm.
what was her
I
name?
forget her
Angelina
name.
Jolie.
Yeah.
Angelina Jolie, and it wasn't her acting that was the issue, but the story. I don't even know what it was on about. It was no relevance to Tomb Raider 1. None
No.
whatsoever.
No.
Zero. I will give them credit. The latest Tomb Raider movie they made was a very close adaptation of the original new Tomb Raiders that they've made. Have you
Yeah,
seen
it
that?
was. Mm-hmm.
I thought they did a great
It's
job
still
of
been a
that.
while since I've seen that one, but yeah, that one was
Mm.
actually pretty good. And for
Yeah,
you
I thought
Tomb
they.
Raider buffs out there, we're getting a animated TV show soon, and we're getting a live TV show soon.
I'm
But
not holding
again,
out much
I
hope.
me neither, because I'm not excited about who the directors are.
Mm.
So, and yeah, I'll let you know how great or horrible those are as well, because
And I
I'll at
think
least watch some videos on them to review.
on the subject of Tomb Raider, whilst we're talking about story and how the modern games are, I actually think even though it takes a different journey than the original Tomb Raiders, I actually think they did a good job of the new Tomb Raiders. I was actually quite impressed with the new Tomb Raider games, the three that they've made for like the new
Yeah.
generation. I think that they were actually, in some ways, more relevant to the title Tomb Raider because she is raiding tombs. You know, part of your
Hmm.
side quest is to go into tombs, and I think the principle of having like a crossbow, sorry, a bow and arrow is pretty cool. And I think the story was pretty good. The second one of the three wasn't that great, but certainly the last one that they did, I was pretty impressed with it. But the first one out of the three that they've done for a modern, well, then again, I say modern. Did that come out in about 2012, 13, something along them
Yeah,
lines?
somewhere in there is about 10 years ago.
Um, I was really impressed with that game, and as a hardcore OG Tomb Raider fan, I was surprised that I liked it because I wasn't expecting to. I don't know what your view
Hmm.
is on them games.
Yeah, I've only played the first one. I haven't played the
Mm,
other three. Or the other two. I have them available to play, but again, just we all have that backlog, don't we, folks?
mm.
And but yeah, the first one was really good and fun to play, and it was engaging, and it was tapping into some of that nostalgia of playing the older games, and it was fun for new audiences too. And
Agreed.
they did a good job, I think, of bridging that gap of the nostalgia versus modern type of gameplay and the graphical quality and just too the quality in which games used to be. Like they didn't need all of these patches just to fix the game for 4 months. They didn't need all of these delays to polish the game for another 8 or 10 months. And that's what we get now. And then the games still suck. Like
Yeah.
Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It's like, okay, we're paying $70 for a game where, regardless of character, everybody can get a gun like Deadshot, and we just hop around and shoot basic enemies and pop purple pimples, and that's the game. And then the reskin of the boss fights. And it's like, how the heck is this $70? And how did Warner Brothers spend over $200 million? Because that's how much they lost on it.
Wow.
So they probably spent another, 50 or 100 million on top of that. So we're talking like a 250, $300 million game that was just awful. I mean, it feels more like a double A game with maybe 80 or $100 million to its name. But no, this was probably after marketing and everything over $300 million.
I haven't played this game. Is it a
Please
story?
don't.
Is it a story game or is it like an online
It's
service type game?
it's it's definitely a live service trying to follow a story. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
And I personally haven't played it myself either, but I've watched a few hours of different videos, of different reviews, of people following the seasons, that they release every so often. But this is supposed to be like, if you do the math, it's supposed to be like a 6 season or 7 season game, and I don't
Wow.
even think it's going to get to 4 seasons. I think they'll cap it, and just be done because again, it's hemorrhaged so much money in its first year, and the game came out this year, and it's already a dead game. And two people, including myself, it's like, "Ooh, we're excited for this. This sounds great," but I think two people are just getting that type of fatigue of just like, oh god, the servers don't work. And that's what I love too about like early access, for example, is people pay early access for some of these games to play a few days quote early, and then the servers don't work like in Diablo 4. So people that were getting ready to here they spent this. It's not like you get a refund, folks. You just literally blew it down the toilet, and you
Absolutely.
don't get it back. And with some of these live service games, of course they're all online. But like if the servers don't even work, it's like you just had fraud. Like you
And I
just
and I have
I
to I
didn't get
have to
three
add to
days.
this. I have to add to this, because I am outside of my story playing, FIFA is my main game outside of all that, and FIFA is very, very good at pushing its promotions. They're probably, in my opinion, the best in the world. And so every Friday or every other Friday, a new promo will drop, new players, new cards, new packs. And for a company that's billions upon billions, they can't even have decent servers for probably one of the most popular online games in the world. And you go to log on at 6 p.m. when the new content drops, and guess what? The servers are down, and they will be down for the next 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating because they get all the hype there, they get all the money, and then to deliver what they're promoting, it never truly works. And that's year round. That's not like at the beginning or midway through. That's virtually on a week by week basis.
Mm.
And as a FIFA fan base, I see it on Twitter all the time. We complain constantly, and what people don't understand is why don't they buy or build or whatever better servers for with all this money that we're paying out in microtransactions? Why don't they do that? Because the game doesn't play how it's supposed to be played,
Yeah.
and that
You know,
is really infuriating.
and what pisses me off too is like, regardless of what game it is, the store functions perfectly.
Mm.
Always. And
Oh yes,
then, and this is for a game we've already paid for. $70 now,
absolutely.
folks. Are you guys counting? And then it's like, okay, now we're buying the seasons, which works great. And then, unless you didn't get your stuff that you paid for or grinded for, and then all of the other microtransactions, yeah, it works perfect. But my game crashes, or I can't log into the server, or I lost connection. Hot damn! And it's just like repeat, and it's every single flippin' AAA game. It is just unbelievable. I mean, I had issues with that in COD. I had issues with that with Destiny 2. There were issues with Diablo. There were problems with. I've seen people have issues with Kill the Justice League too, even though there's a few hundred people or maybe a couple thousand playing the game. And oh my word, it's just like what are people paying for? It's like, do we realize what we're paying for? And as long as they keep getting the money, folks, they're not gonna make it better because there's no
This is
incentive
yeah.
to make it better. And that's
This is
ultimately what
exactly
a
what we keep talking about in the FIFA community. We keep
yeah.
saying, why do we keep purchasing these packs, giving them all this money when they won't fix the problem? If we stop buying all the packs, they'll probably fix the problem. But for
Yeah.
some reason, we allow ourselves to just keep getting quote unquote bent over. That's what we allow to keep happening.
Yeah, well, it's been accepted. And
Yes.
it's the same thing with like early access, 3 or 4 or 5 days. It's like, oh, the servers are effed. It's like, well, okay, great. I guess I'm just gonna check in the next hour. I'm gonna, go
Yeah.
get coffee or something, and oh gosh, they're still down. And or my favorite has been people can play on permadeath for Diablo 4, and they have literally had the server crash. Um, and then when they boot it back up, their character's dead. Well, there goes, 200 hours of gameplay and all of the freaking microtransactions and everything. And it's like, it's just, good luck. Start over, I guess. I mean, I would so rage quit, my house would blow up. There would be a massive fireball going off in my town because I would be unbelievably enraged. And it's like, again, this is a AAA game. This game has made hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's like,
Billions.
yeah, well, yeah, probably billions now. Yeah. Diablo 4. And it's like, why are we paying for this stuff? Because I'm serious, folks. You and I, and those of you listening, we don't have a vote by ourselves, but we
No.
do have a voice in mass. And that's what we need to be promoting and getting out there is like, if we want a better industry, we need to see our spending habits in it as an investment. And if it's not going to help the industry make better experiences for us, don't pay for it.
Agreed. Agreed.
because I'm tired too of like the digital closet shopping experience. That's what I call it.
Yes.
And it's like we have accumulated all of this stuff to just curse at our TV screen while we're trying to grind for the next thing because something happened or we died or lost connection, whatever. And then it's like we have all of this stuff in our digital closet with this game. In most cases, won't even transfer over to the next game anyway. And
Correct.
how many dozens or hundreds or thousands of dollars is that? I
Mm.
remember talking
FIFA
to
is a
it.
prime example of that. You spend all this money getting
Yeah.
this incredible team, and me, I'm one of them who've done it. And then come end of August, the new FIFA drops, and you are back with the most basic team in history, and you've got to do it all over again. And people do it all over again,
Yeah.
and
And just like you said
it doesn't make
earlier,
sense.
no, just like you said earlier, it's all about like they have marketed the games so well. They keep people
Yes.
thinking about the present of, oh, I have to grind for that or I have to go for that. And two, we used to be able to grind for skins for our characters, for our
Yeah.
guns or for our gear or whatever, and now we pay for them.
Well, you
And
can
again,
still
it's,
do that on FIFA. You
oh,
can,
that's
but
good.
as I said earlier, unless you're unemployed and you can put 12 hours a day in, it's not happening. And they design it that way so people think, well, I've got 3 or 4 hours on a Tuesday, I can play 5 hours on a Friday and 7 hours on a Sunday, let's say, for argument's sake. And they think, well, that isn't enough time for me to do all the grinding and then play the actual games. Because in FIFA, you spend a lot of time just in the menus, grinding packs and doing challenges and this, that, and the other. And by the time you actually get to playing, you've got no time to play. And so they design it that way so that people think, well, I can just spend $80, for example, buy the FIFA points, open the packs, and get the items that I need instead. And that is very, very clever. Wrong, but
Hmm.
clever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty unethical.
It's very unethical.
It's
It's a
pretty messed up. It was the same with like the I forget what um I think it was Nexon. I forget what game it was, but there was something that you had a rare chance of getting with the packs that you were buying and spending. And but the problem is that there was some iffiness there, so there was like an official investigation done, and we found out that getting that particular item through these type of packs or loot boxes that people were buying, it wasn't even possible to get that item,
wow. Oh my.
and it was like hundreds of millions of dollars that like players spent on that to try to get that. And it's like, at what point, folks, like that is definitely fraud, right? um
FIFA's
but
exactly the same.
it's like, how fraudulent is some of this stuff? We have an
Mm.
idea of like, ooh, we could win. It's like the lottery getting the jackpot, right, folks?
Yes.
You know, here we have a jackpot lottery um, called Powerball. You know, and it's like 1 out of 232 million chance
Yes. Yes.
for getting jackpot. You can possibly win other prizes and stuff, but again, people really pay for that jackpot. But it's like, I would love to see transparency and regulation step in to say, look, you need to tell the players how likely it is to actually get the item that you're trying to, sell them as an opportunity to get when you buy a loot box or you buy a pack or whatever.
Well, FIFA do sort of do this. Like, so when you right click on the pack, it will give you a percentage. So let's say in the new promotion there are 15 special cards that you may
Hmm.
want. However, if you specifically want one player out of all of them, and there's normally one that's the creme de creme of them all, and someone looked into the coding of the game once upon a time. Don't know how they got into it, but they did it through the PC version of FIFA. And the odds, the player is Cristiano Ronaldo, and
Mm.
he's perhaps the best in the world. And he had a special card, and the odds of getting him in the pack, it was double the odds of the lottery, double. So you're talking nigh on
uh,
impossible. But
yeah.
where they actually advertise is, so the promotion, for example, is called Team of the Season, and it will say Team of the Season player 5.4%, but that could be any of those Team of the Season players. And generally, out of the 15, 7 are no good. and they're the 7 you will repeatedly get over and over again. And so
Wow.
to me, that's like, as you used earlier, the word fraud. In Belgium, FIFA points have been banned. You can't purchase them. In a court of law, they they deemed it as gambling. And what the biggest problem that they encountered, and this is ripe in the UK, I'm not so much sure about the US, children, teenagers, were stealing their parents' credit cards to purchase FIFA points.
Oh yeah, that
That's
happens
how it
here.
does that happen? That's how addictive
Yeah.
and they've
It's
made
not for
this
FIFA,
platform.
probably. It's probably for like or Roblox and Fortnite
Mm?
is probably what it is. Maybe Apex too, but
Yeah,
um, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. It's I've enjoyed this so much. I just gotta say this is a blast. I hope you guys are enjoying it too. Boy, we certainly are.
absolutely.
Let's finish with a couple of last questions here because
Okay,
we're already almost at an hour, which is
that's fine.
incredible. Um, where do you think the gaming industry is going? Like maybe, I mean, you can take it as like the next few years or like for the rest of this decade, but like the projection and the way things have happened over time from what we remember playing as kids to the progression of how things are today, where can you see gaming going in the
I
future?
I think I believe that as a human race, and because gaming is more for the younger generation rather than the older generation, children only know what they know. So someone of 14 will have no idea what games we're even probably talking about right now. And so as new people come on into this earth and they grow up, they learn, well, they don't learn, they just grow up and are used to what is available now. And so I would love to say that this whole online and microtransaction thing will die and will go back to the way it was. It won't happen. What will happen is it will continue the way that it is, maybe even get worse. And that will be okay because the younger generation do not know any different. And it's only us, we're coming up to our mid 30s, maybe 40s, and a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
generation from the 90s, no, will probably maybe stop playing video games. And so our opinion is very irrelevant. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that with time now, this is just what it is, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get better. I think that it's only going to get worse. Maybe microtransactions will increase even more, become more expensive. Games are already going up in price to buy them. Um, I don't think it's a bright future for the world of video games for the older generation, but for the younger generation, it's happy days because they don't know any different anyway.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I certainly think that yeah, things will continue as they are. I don't think it will be as trend following as it is today because we had a massive influx of stimulus for most of the countries around the world with the lockdowns, and there was a lot of extra money floating around and the same amount of goods. And we had a lot of new startups too within the last 5 years, and so yeah, there was a lot of trend following and chasing and just trying to grab that money. I think when reality is setting in, kind of like it is right now, like with Kill the Justice League losing $200 million and Destiny 2 losing 45% of revenue year over year in 23. I think there is kind of a wake up call because, like, Embracer Group has canceled 28 games. We've also had a lot of layoffs. We've had a lot of studio closures. Um, we've had epic failures like Kill the Justice League and Saints Row Reboot and Redfall. These games were just not ready or didn't have good design. Skull and Bones, in my opinion, would be another one, as it's just nowhere near a Black Flag, Assassin's Creed Black Flag experience like a lot of us were hoping for, even though it's from the same publisher. And while I don't think it will go away, I think the big dogs will continue and can afford to continue to make live service games like Call of Duty or Diablo or whatever else, or FIFA, Madden, etc. I think there will be a shift toward um, more either smaller budget games, like Sony has talked about making smaller budgets. Their Spider-Man 2 game was 312 million just to make the
Wow.
game. and that doesn't include marketing and other stuff. And um, but like they still haven't made their money back, which is crazy.
Mm.
Uh, and another game like Alan Wake 2, they're hoping to break even by the end of this year with all of the money that they
Wow.
spent on the game. And so, like, the budgets are too big, and the games aren't selling enough. And so I think this is going to shift the industry, and I think people will go back to what sells. And they have examples like Baldur's Gate 3, like Hi-Fi Rush, or Evil Within, or The Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring. These are all examples of games that have sold actually pretty well and made their money back. Even like Pow World or Helldivers 2, um, because of again, the focus is the experience of the player, the storytelling, and the character development and the world building that goes on in the game. And I think companies will start to figure this out, or they'll just go bust. And because there's not enough just disposable income to just continue to support all of these live service games.
Well, I was
Um,
going to add to your point there. I really
sure.
think it's important to say that, you talk about like Alan Wake 2 are hoping to break even and things along them lines. Do you honestly believe that it's solely the games that are the issue, or do you believe that the economy now is also the problem, that people can't maybe afford to maybe buy these games as much? You said earlier you like to wait for the games to come into the sale. I'm not one of them. Well, luckily for me, I'm in a better financial position than probably most. But do you believe that the fact that the economy worldwide is pretty poor right now, people can't even afford to eat, so maybe buying a video game is not high on the priority list, and maybe that is affecting sales, and maybe it's not the games as much. Would you say that's accurate?
I think I would definitely think, yeah, the economy is having a massive effect. Just here in the United States, we, with stimulus money to companies, um, direct checks to taxpayers, all of that stuff was roughly about $9.5 trillion in the span of just 24 months, and that was a lot of money for everybody, including companies too. And so there was a lot of stuff invested in like crypto and NFTs, and we don't even really think about that kind of stuff anymore. But there
Yeah,
was a lot of money pumped into that, and now it's just vaporized into nothing. And while I do think that was a really kind of like financially rich environment with all of this liquidity available for companies and for individuals, we're certainly having that pullback of like, okay, we need to start paying our bills again. We need to start paying back our debts and paying for rent and our car loans and student loans and credit cards, and well, now we also have less money with also now higher inflation. So like here in the States, we hit about 9.2% inflation in 22. And I know for pretty much everywhere else in the world, it's been way higher
yes, it
than
has.
that. And it's
Yeah,
been utterly insane. And so, yeah, people are having to choose what's absolutely necessary. And in this um, stricter liquidity environment of the economy with just the general consumer, they're having to choose really what type of game they would love to play. And that's why,
correct.
Stellar Blade and Hogwarts Legacy and Elden Ring and um, Baldur's Gate 3 have sold so much, or even like Helldivers 2. That's technically a live service game, but it's also made a ton of money, and it is
Yeah,
a blast to play because it feels like they designed the game first, and then they said, look, if you want to, you can also pay for these microtransactions as well. And there's also a pretty easy, free way to get a lot of those microtransactions by just playing the game. And there's not all of these crazy loopholes and stuff. So I do think these companies, they're gonna have to start understanding that there's just less money available. And there was a
absolutely.
survey done last year. I forget exactly the outfit, but they surveyed um, about 1,000 developers, and 300 and some responded back. And these developers were asked about if they think live service is a viable business model for a game anymore, and 60% plus said no. They
Wow.
really don't believe it's viable anymore because while there was a bunch of money available because of stimulus, etc., that's not the case anymore. And now we have added inflation on top of it. And so people are having to make those decisions. And that's why we're seeing layoffs and studio closures and all of this and canceled games because, yeah, just the money is not available. And the companies are realizing that. And for 60% of the surveyed businesses that responded to say, yeah, we don't know if we really want to do a live service game. Well, the only other type of game you can really do is just strictly multiplayer on a small
Yes.
budget and make it cheap, do remasters, or make a new IP and do a story based game with story and character development. And that does give me some hope. And but yeah, I still think it'll take the rest of this decade to get there because while we've
But
had,
you talk about small budget, right?
mhm,
I'd as much as Call of Duty has always been a giant in the online world, I don't believe that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, for example, in my opinion, the best Call of Duty ever made, particularly had a huge budget because it may have. I've never looked it up, but the point I'm trying to make is it was an online multiplayer game with no microtransactions. They just made the game and they sold it, and it's probably one of the highest selling games of all time. So
yeah.
why does it necessarily need to be a small budget?
Well, like Sony was talking about with their PlayStation, is that they want to make this budget smaller because they have to make cuts somewhere, and they don't want to close or lay everybody off. And so they're having to they're just tightening the belt on these smaller budgets. Sony said they want to have budgets now be around 150 or 200 million max, and no longer be any more than that. Because again, Spider-Man 2 was 312
But that was a great
with
game from what I've heard. I've
and
never
and
played
it
it, but
was a
I've
great
heard.
game.
Yeah.
But it still hasn't made its money back. They'd have to sell roughly about 7.75 million copies just to break even on the developer budget, and they're
And
still licensing.
this is exactly why I made the point I made earlier. So we've just agreed that it cost 300 million to make, and it was a really great game. So why is it not selling? Because people don't have any money to
Yeah,
buy as many. The amount of games that come out over a 12-month period now is frightening. It's almost impossible to play everything you want to play because you can't afford $60 or $70 every month on this new game. And so I don't think Spider-Man 2, for example, was the issue. I've read incredible things about that game. Why isn't it sold enough? 7.7 isn't a huge figure of copies that they need to sell, in my opinion.
right.
And so why isn't it selling? Because people don't have enough money to just keep buying all these different games all the time. So people are being more selective in their purchases. That's what my point I was trying to make.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I maybe I'm just not wording it well. But yeah, I agree. There's definitely less money for the consumer, so they have to choose. And I'm just
Yes.
hoping that some of these companies they're starting to understand, live service isn't going to work because live service is actually pretty expensive.
Very.
Some of the teams for these are like 800 devs on one game just to
Yes.
make some bundles and whatever, and they don't necessarily sell all of those bundles. It's actually a really small part of the overall player base for most of these games. Like most people will buy a season pass, but not everybody buys like a special bundle outside of that season pass. People
Mm.
are looking for more value, to your point. Um, but yeah, these companies are having to make adjustments because they're trying to limit risk of spending all of this money and then not being able to make anything off of that product or service. And
Yes,
I
and I
think,
think, go on,
yeah,
sorry.
and I think too, this is why more companies, like Ubisoft, like EA, are trying to, even COD, are trying to make these subscription services or make more of them. Like Apex Legends said, look, we're going to split the season pass into two seasons that now you can pay for double the price for the same amount of stuff. So that's just
Okay.
100% increase. Instead of paying your general $40 or 35 or whatever for the season pass, we're now going to split it into two, and now you can grind through that and pay for all of your extra fancy, microtransaction stuff
Yeah.
but now you're going to pay the same price for half of it, and then you're going to pay for another price. You're going to double. They're essentially doubling the
What
price.
you're getting for your money.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying like if the season pass is $20, um, they're now splitting that season pass in half and giving you two to pay for, and the price is still $20 for that first half, and then the second half is again $20. So now
Well,
you're
COD
paying
have been doing
40
that for years.
for yeah. But yeah, there's more there's more subscription service like behavior from some of these companies. Ubisoft also with Rainbow Six Siege, they just added a whole nother subscription service, premium tier stuff that
Yeah.
isn't going to be available anywhere else, and you pay another. I forget what the price is, but yeah, you're going to pay on top of season pass, on top of buying the game if you don't have it already, and other microtransactions. There's a whole nother like third tier, if you will, of for this subscription service, and they announced that earlier this year. And so I think
EAFC
companies
are
are.
incorporating this as well. I read it
Oh,
the
are
other
they?
day, and yeah, so EAFC next year. So we have a season thing at the minute, and it's free. You earn XP through doing challenges in the game, and it unlocks packs or players and things like that. And it's free. You just work through it and whatever. But what they are doing now, they're saying you can continue with the free one, it'll still be there, but you can buy a premium one, and you get the all the free stuff and the premium stuff, which is way, way better and more appealing. And it's going to be
Mm.
like $30 every
Oh
season. But
wow.
we have 5 seasons in FIFA. That's
That.
five $30 a
Yeah.
year.
Uh.
So and FIFA have never done this before. Well, sorry, it's not FIFA anymore. It's EAFC. They have
Right.
never ever implemented that before ever, and people will pay it. People will pay it.
Yeah. And there's also too like Overwatch also did the same thing. I can't remember if it was last year or this year, but they did the same thing where it's like, yeah, here's a free pass or whatever, and now there's a second one on top of it to actually pay for, and of course,
Yeah,
again, it's more appealing. Um,
absolutely.
and yeah, so the, there's just less money available for everybody, and
Mm.
everybody's costs have gone up. And while I don't want to excuse these companies fraudulently, in my opinion, in most cases, cheating people out of their money because they don't know any better or they don't have the discipline to say no. These companies too also have their costs going up. Like
Yeah.
the server farm just for the first month for Pal World was 420 some million. Um, or no, excuse me, 420 some $1,000 just for the
Yeah.
first month, just to house all of the players that wanted to play Pal World. And
Yeah.
Pocket Pair was like, we don't have that money. We can't run it. Like, we're literally going to go broke in a few months because we don't have that. And so Microsoft stepped in and said, look, we will basically pay some kind of agreement, probably to pay them back or whatever,
Yeah.
with sales. But it worked out for Pocket Pair because they made a whole bunch in sales
Yeah.
for a $30 beta game. And it is fun for what it is. But like Helldivers 2 or like Pal World or like some of the other games that we talk about, is there needs to be innovation again. And my last question is, what are you? Is there anything that you're hopeful for the future of gaming? And that's what my hope is for. Is that the financial pressure will force some of these companies to change, because some of them are already showing that with the development, the character development, the storytelling, like Elden Ring and Evil Within and Breath of the Wild and others that we've talked about or mentioned, they do make a ton of money, and they
Yeah.
make their money back very, very quickly in just a few months, while other games are praised for being wonderful and good, but it's been 2 years and they still haven't made their money back.
Yes.
And something's
Um,
got to change here.
so what do I hope is going to happen?
Yeah,
First
what are
and
you hopeful for?
foremost, first and foremost, the Evil Within 3 would be lovely, but I'm not too hopeful. I'm not too hopeful. What do I hope for? It's a very interesting question, and I think what I hope for, I never really think about because I don't believe it's possible. I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe they can produce what we want anymore. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think there's any originality left that they can make. I don't know if, then again, that's not strictly true. Where did the Evil Within come from? That was just out of nowhere, and that was genius. But for the most part, I think they're struggling with things to make. I mean, one of the things I think that they're sitting on a gold mine and they need to do is whoever decides to do it. The original, sorry, the Harry Potter games they made years ago were terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Make new ones of them, and it will sell. Look how well Hogwarts Legacy sold, and it's not strictly based on the Harry Potter story, but because it's
Right.
associated with Harry Potter, the sales were phenomenal. If they were to remake, not remaster, remake those Harry Potter games, but the first Harry Potter game, second, third, they would make a truckload of money if they got it right, because everybody loves Harry Potter. Anything to
Mm-hmm.
do with Harry Potter sells. And so that would be something that would be nice to see. I want to see them make a decent Resident Evil game again. The last decent one they made was the remake of Resident Evil 4. It was mind blowing. They did a phenomenal job, but they had a very good story to base it off. All they had to do was get it graphically right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then they made Resident Evil Village and all that kind of stuff, and it was okay, but it was mediocre. I'd like to see them return back to those original roots again. That would be incredible. Um, but I don't really talk about it or think about it because I don't believe it's possible. I don't believe they listen to the consumer either. I think that people, the general people like me and you, should be given a voice and that we should be allowed to speak because all they do is hire the professional people to test their games. But the problem is they get paid to do that, so they aren't going to criticize them because they want to keep earning money. But
Yeah.
me and you have got nothing to lose. And so I think if it was randomly selected by the public to give their feedback on what they want and they listen to the public, I think that could go more in their favor on how they design their games in the future. Um, but for the most part, I'd like to see a reduction in microtransactions. I've got no issue with online gaming. I've got an issue with microtransactions because, like I said earlier, COD 4, Modern Warfare 2, Halo, the greatest online games ever, in my opinion. They were online, but there was no microtransactions. You could either buy the base version of the game or you could buy like the hardened edition for an extra 20, £30. And that covers you then for the year for the DLC that they're going to release. No problem with that. That works. Go back to that platform. Keep the online scene there, keep it going, Call of Duty, FIFA, do whatever you want. Reduce the microtransactions. Get some decent story games along going again. Uh, Aside from that, there's nothing, but what I'm asking is definitely not realistic.
Yeah. I think my hope is that as channels like mine, channels like yours, like you're starting yours up again. By the way, folks,
Yeah,
link in the description down below for his channel. And but like my hope is that a lot of these companies will see their failure or their continued failure or not enough money coming in for these microtransactions live service games, and
yeah,
they will want to go back to the roots of making story games again. And
yeah,
and one of them that I am excited about that saw the writing on the wall is BioWare, because they made Anthem, which was definitely a co-op multiplayer live service game, and but like it did really bad because it wasn't designed well. It wasn't even finished. Like people were running into textures that weren't even present on some of the models, and they're like, "What the heck is going on?" And
Yeah.
when they were asked last year about microtransactions, or maybe it was 22 now, but they said, "No, we don't want to make a live service microtransaction game." Um,
Interesting.
and there's been some other companies like CD Project Red. They did Cyberpunk 2077. We've
Yep.
also had From Software and Larian also come out and say, no, we're not going to do microtransactions. Even Pocket Pair, that made Pal World, they could certainly have a microtransaction model for gussying up your pals or your own character and whatever. But again, they're like, no, we're not going to do that. So we do have
That's
some.
really good to hear.
Yeah,
That's
we do
really good
have
to
some
hear.
studios now that are seeing the writing on the wall, and they're seeing the other side of the depraved market, like us, that just want good stories and engagement again in the games instead of just grinding for stuff and having that be the story. And so I'm hoping the difference in revenue of these story-driven games that are getting Game of the Year, that are making all of this money and selling all of these copies, that eventually they'll be looked at by the rest of the industry and be like, you know what? We maybe want to do something like that too. Let's come up with our own thing.
Maybe
And
there is hope then.
with all of these layoffs, there's also a ton of people. There's tens of thousands of devs and concept artists running around out there now that are trying to figure out what to do. And some of them are going out and starting their own studios. And again, coming out and saying, look, we want to make a video game. We don't want to make a live service. And so
Yeah.
that's like Bad Brain, 100 Star, Giant Skull, and a few others that I can't remember. But these have all been made within the last 18 months, and they're working on games right now to actually make and put out there. And my frustration, again, just like you, is live service. So much energy and effort is put into these skins um, that there's not much left for actual storytelling. And while I think some games definitely benefit from a live service model, maybe like Fortnite or whatever, um,
Call of Duty.
yeah, they definitely, though, in a way, need to be free to play if the focus is just solely microtransactions, because
Agreed.
otherwise they don't provide enough of an actual game to play outside of that microtransaction. And so, like, I think Fortnite, yeah, that'll be around forever. I really do think
Yes,
that'll be around
it
for
will.
around a long time. But again, games like Concord, um, that will be coming out next month, they want you to pay $40 to play another Overwatch clone with
Yeah.
microtransactions on top of it. And again, I don't think, like you were saying, people don't have the money, and so they're not going to pay for that game even with just the open beta that was last weekend or a couple weekends now maybe. Their numbers were really bad, and and I don't think they're going to see any money from Concord at all, and that'll be another failed one. And I think another one too, also that isn't looking great, is Marathon. There's a whole story. There could be a whole campaign there from the old games in the '90s. It's all there. They just got to redo it, right? But no, instead they're making a PvP game, and it's just like, gosh, it'll be live service to death, made by Bungie, as Destiny 2 kind of goes to die. And again, I don't think people are going to be super excited about that. So my hope is just that the industry, with where the money flow goes, is that people that are younger than us will see what's going on and just choose to not pay as much for microtransaction games, and they'll buy the games that are actually fun again. And then
Do you
companies
believe that will
will see
actually
that.
happen?
I think some are. There's some channels that I follow where they still play a lot of competitive shooters, but like Nero's Cinema, he really enjoys and has played COD just like you a ton. He's not as old as we are. He's in his kind of like mid 20s. Uh,
Yeah.
but uh, but he sees the live service for what it is now, and he talks about it on his channel. And then he
Interesting.
plays X Defiant, made by
Yeah.
Ubisoft, which is a free-to-play 6v6 game. And
It actually looks incredible.
he's like, this game is so fun. He's like, I would be
Yeah.
willing to pay some microtransactions to support the game, to support the devs, because they're actually listening to the player base. And his whole channel now is essentially comparing X Defiant versus COD. So I'm excited to see what he puts out when Black Ops 6 releases. Um, and his channel's actually growing pretty big, so I know there's people watching it. And then there's other
Interesting.
channels like Luke Stevens, Young Yeah, The Angry Joe Show, Mr. Matty Plays. They're all seeing too the writing on the wall of what's going on. And while some of them are older like we are, some of them too are also younger, and they're like, look, we like story-driven games because it's fun. You know, the co-op
Yes.
stuff, it's fun. And it's like the microtransactions, they're not micro anymore. They're macro
No, they're
transactions.
huge. They're
Yeah.
huge.
And it's
You
like
know, they're more than the
eventually,
game.
yeah, oh yeah. Like horse
Yeah.
armor for Diablo 4 was like 60
Yeah.
bucks.
Yeah.
Which is
12,000
insane.
FIFA points is £80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just utterly wild, and um I still think it'll take the rest of this decade to kind of shift stuff around. But again, it's not a guarantee that it's going to happen. Um,
No, it's not.
I hope it does, but there is some shifting in the market that's indicating that there's still maybe some hope out there.
Perhaps. Perhaps. I'm not as hopeful as perhaps you are, because you talk a lot about the smaller industries.
Hmm.
The giants rule everything, and that applies in every element of life.
Yeah.
And FIFA is incredibly successful. Sorry, EAFC is incredibly successful. Call of Duty is the same. I've got high hopes for Black Ops 6. I don't play the newer CODs anymore because they're terrible, but Treyarch, who are like part of Activision, have had 4 years to develop this game. Four
Hmm.
years. They used to bust them out every 12 months.
Yeah.
They've had 4 years to make this, and I'm expecting them to have done something really good. But again, it probably hasn't because it appeals to the younger market. What I want is 2009 MW2, but it's all different engines and different all this kind of stuff. And now it's all about crazy movement and fancy characters. I mean, in the last Call of Duty, you could run around as Santa Claus, you
Yeah.
know, and you know, in Fortnite, I believe you could play as King Kong, and it's just crazy. It's supposed to be a first person war shooter. I can't see my character, so why does it matter what he wears? I don't really care.
Yeah.
I just want me, the gun, and some decent gameplay and decent map design. The map design of the older Call of Duties is phenomenal. I'll name a few. Grind from Black Ops 2, Terminal
Mm.
from MW2, you know, High Rise. They're just simple 3 lane maps. That's all they are. 3 lanes, relatively small, suitable for 6 or 9v9. And they played perfectly. And now they just overcomplicate it, try and make it look too good, make them too big. I think that Warzone has kind of ruined Call of Duty as well because that seems to have took off because it's free to play.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I don't know. I'm quite a pessimistic person because money talks, and you saying about the Spider-Man, this, that, and the other. If they've made 210 million of their 300 million back, it's not going to hit them that hard because they're such a big organization, and they'll probably make it back through something else. And so, how they will look at it is, in my opinion. So let's say Spider-Man didn't do great, but FIFA has made 150% more profit than they anticipated. They haven't really lost anything. And I think that's what, but the smaller companies, yes, I would probably say you are correct. I think that they may take a different approach. Whether they can get people to buy their games because they come from smaller organizations, I'm not so sure. However, because people look at branding, it's like when you go into a shop and you see an item of clothing and it's made by X company, or there's this one that's made by this company and you've never heard of them before, you're likely to go with the brand that you know in most
Mm.
cases. So, like, if they bring out a survival horror game and it's called something completely different, Well, I always think, well, it's not Capcom and Resident Evil, is it? Or it's not Tango and the Evil Within. And so, how are they going to get these people to buy their games when they're completely unknown? That's the part I don't understand.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and like you said earlier, there's a ton of games out there that are now made. Just the kind of bigger titles for just console, there's like over 500 a year now, and
Yes,
we only hear about 30 of them. And so,
exactly.
how can you, yeah, how can you get that
A lot
money?
of these games you've mentioned in this podcast to me, I've never even heard of. I have no idea what you're talking about with some of them, like uh, this League. I've never heard of it. I know it's something to do with like Batman and all that kind of stuff. Um, but some of these small, really small games that you've mentioned, I couldn't even tell you what they are, and I've never heard of them. So how are they going to reach me? How am I even going to hear of them? You hear of them because you're very much involved in it, or you're very
Right.
much
Yeah.
you do a lot of research and a lot of study. But I've never even heard of these games. I have no idea what you're even talking about. And I'm now what I consider a general casual player, in my opinion. That's what I am.
Mm.
I'm an enthusiast, but for the main titles, mainly like if I'm looking at like my home screen on my Xbox now, you've got EAFC, Crash Team Racing, The Evil Within, Final Fantasy, Grand Theft Auto, Resident Evil, Tomb Raider, Silent Hill, Spyro, Tekken. These are all the giants. They're all made by the big corporations. These smaller games that you speak of, I'm not even sure what they are, and that's what the problem I think they will have is reaching the general consumer.
That's a really good point. It's the same. It's the
Yeah.
same with like Tango GameWorks made Hi-Fi Rush, and
I've
if
never even heard of that.
yeah, if and it won Game of the Year and stuff. But again, if people aren't paying attention, and I certainly think there's a um, older generation of gamer now like us, where unless you're really keeping up with it and stuff, you're you're not really paying attention anymore. Um,
Agreed.
and because yeah, it's just so disheartening in most cases to see what IPs used to be compared to what they are now, what they've been turned into. Like I was a
I
huge
agree.
Battlefield guy, and now I don't even really care what the next Battlefield is.
Same with me with Call of Duty, and I think these story games that these smaller companies may be making, my philosophy and the way I look at it now is I play FIFA year round. And if I happen to hear on the grapevine that, oh my God, they're remaking Resident Evil 4, or oh my God, there's this incredible horror game called The Evil Within, or Tomb Raider's been remastered, I'm like, yeah, I'll buy it. That's my philosophy now because I kind of stick with what I know, but I don't go out there looking for unknown things. Do you understand what
Oh
I'm trying to
yeah,
say? And I
absolutely.
think, um, which I may not have the right philosophy when I do that, but I stick to FIFA and I just casually play on that and I do what I do. But on my Xbox now is all like remakes, really. Resident Evil 3 remake, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, Tomb Raider, things like that. But I think the older generation stick to what they know anyway. They may have more of a chance with the younger generation because they're more open-minded, I think.
Mm. Well, and that the younger generations too will also get older at some point, and they again will
Absolutely.
just stick with what they know. And it was Rainbow Six Siege and Fortnite and Roblox
Yes.
and
Mm.
Warzone and stuff.
Minecraft.
Yeah, and like that's what they'll know. And so yeah, that's a very interesting dynamic to bring up because are they considering that the younger generations will get older and more senile like us
Absolutely.
and just
Yeah.
more
Rose-tinted
pessimistic
glasses.
and frustrated and
Mm.
how to make a game for everybody is really to make a game for no one and um, trying to make everybody happy with something because yeah there's a ton of games that even researchers like me haven't even heard about. It's like, oh, this studio is closing and this game's being taken offline, and it's like,
Mm.
good golly, I've never even heard about that game. And apparently there were,
Yeah.
tens of millions sunk into it. And so, yeah, there's a really big fish pond now. Um, It is a vast ocean of all of these different, games swimming around in it, and it's really hard to get noticed.
Yeah, and I think what's also really important whilst you're talking about that is I was just going about my daily life, going work, coming home and spending time with the missus and then playing on my video games. And I happened to be watching a long play of The Evil Within 2 one day. I just fancied watching a playthrough of it. And then seem to remember the end credit song. I thought, oh my God, it's incredible. So I YouTubed the song, and the top comment was, "Rest in peace, Tango Gameworks." Now, for the
Mm,
past 3 years, I've been sat here like, oh, cool, yeah, I'm eagerly waiting them to announce Evil Within 3. They've got to announce it soon. These two have been so successful. It was only because I went on a song of the Evil Within 2, looked at the top comment, that I even knew that Tango Gameworks didn't even exist anymore. So to a casual, that's how they stumble across information. Whereas you research it and you know all these different things, but most people, I would say 80%, I'm going to go that high, 80% of people don't know the information that you know. And I think that companies also know that. So I've just been sat here waiting for the Evil Within 3, and by and large, it's never going to happen.
yeah,
And so for them to reach me with smaller games from companies I've never heard of, the odds are pretty slim.
yeah.
Pretty slim, unless they do some mass marketing.
And two, that's why I have my channel. It's the reason why I call it gaming garbage is because gaming today is garbage. Uh,
Absolutely.
and it's incredibly frustrating. And so my channel, while there's some entertainment in there, is also stuff like this, podcasts or weekly news or whatever, to actually try to educate people about what's going on. And
Agreed.
and while it's a small channel, I'm surprised at how fast it's growing.
It
and
will grow. It's
yeah, and
informative.
and it's something I really enjoy doing too. And so the fact that I have people like yourself that engage with the channel and talk about stuff and are willing to leave comments and share experiences, it does give me hope too that eventually they can only microtransaction the market to death for so long. Again, some of those big companies, it'll stay the next Diablo and COD and Tekken, like they'll always be microtransaction now.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it does give me a little bit of hope that people are starting to quote wake up to actually what's going on and that their microtransactions really don't make the game fun. It's just stuff to do, and there's much cheaper alternatives to doing that.
And in the FIFA world, in the FIFA, sorry, the EAFC world,
Mhm.
not only does it not make it fun, opening packs is fun. It's a little bit of an adrenaline rush. It's like, do you remember the Kinder eggs when you were a kid,
Oh
and you'd
yeah,
open it and you didn't know what
they're
you were going to get
still
inside?
around, believe it or not, over
Yeah,
here. It's
it's a
crazy.
little bit like one of them. So you open the pack, you're like, am I going to get this player? Am I going to get this player? But it also makes FIFA incredibly competitive because FIFA isn't a pay to win game. So, or else we wouldn't have professional players because we do have professional players. And so I could have the best team in the world available on FIFA and I could go and play a pro who's got a not very good team and he'd still beat me. So
Mm.
it's not a pay to win game, but for the average consumer, so if I was playing someone of a similar level as me, if he's got them little bit better players than I have, he will generally win 9 times out of 10. And that makes it frustrating for people because they know they're losing because they don't have the better players. So
Mm.
therefore they spend money to get it's a massive like it's a psychological thing. It really does. And then what doesn't help is there are streamers like Bateson and there's another guy who's over in America and the game will come out in September and this is not an exaggeration. He had 2 million FIFA points on his account. I calculated it. It cost him 44 grand.
Oh,
He spent £44,000 on FIFA points. Now, it's not the end of the world to him for three
right.
or four reasons.
Sure.
He'll make the money back through streaming, YouTube videos, sponsorship. He's not stupid, he's a businessman. But kids see him doing this and think, well, that must be the way to go then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's an issue
these
too.
people don't realize the influence they have on these people. That it's stupid, but they're kind of like celebrities to the gaming world.
Oh yeah.
And what they do is a reflection on the younger generation. And that was why it leads to the cause of children stealing their parents' credit cards. It's like, well, I've got to do this because that's what he's doing. And that means he's getting these players, and that's what's happening. And the chaos that it causes. And I don't think it should be allowed personally, but they keep making the money. If he's spending 44 grand in one day on FIFA, and that's one streamer, there are many. The pros don't get free packs. The pros, I know one particular pro, on the day of release, he'll spend 20 grand because he has to get his team good, ready for tournaments.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the money that goes into it, but it's who sees this happening. And what we see is what we deem as normality, and that applies to everything in life. If you what you saw your parents doing as a child, that's what you generally do when you grow up. And so the same principles apply, and it's kind of toxic, really. FIFA is, I don't know why I love the game so much because it's a really bad, terrible, evil thing. It's been, FIFA Point's been banned in about 7 countries now. It went to Parliament in England, but their solicitor argued it in the case of a Kinder Egg. They're saying, well, it's not gambling, is it? Because you're guaranteed a return. Just because you don't know
Yeah.
what you're
Something.
getting doesn't mean it's not. Yeah, just then. So we didn't win, but Belgium banned it. They were like, no, this is not okay. This is gambling. It's covered up gambling, and children are effectively gambling. And as a recovering gambling addict, which I haven't told you yet, but I am a recovering gambling addict. I've been clean for over 2 years.
Hey, congratulations.
Um, Thank you
That's
very
awesome.
much. Yeah, I spent well over 200 grand on gambling. It was a really dark time over a 10-year period. I can tell you, as an addict, the recovering addict, the feeling, the brain stimulation of opening packs on FIFA is the identical rush and feeling that you get when you gamble.
Hmm.
How scary is that?
There you go, folks. It's right there. We've had that inkling for a while. It's just like,
Yeah.
the practices of microtransactions of what they've become is to not be fun or to even be entertaining, is to be addicting. And that's why the
Yes.
colors are so vibrant and the sounds
The
and
sounds, yeah.
oh yeah, I wonder what this is going to be. And I mean, you could walk into a casino and oh my word, and all of the colors and sounds in there, it's overwhelming sometimes. And
Yeah.
but here they're
But children
I
are doing this. This is my
yeah,
problem.
yeah, it's
Children
mine
like
too.
10, 11, 12, 13, and it's encouraging gambling in young people. Now, gambling in the UK is at an all-time high. We have a serious crisis. Over the past 6 months, the use of gambling recovery services has gone up 42%.
That's awful.
42% because people have got no money, so they're trying to gamble the money,
Right.
the little bit of money they do have to get more money so they can eat. I was in a local supermarket the other day, and a guy walked in with a balaclava and two shopping bags and just started sweeping things off the shelf. And he walked out of the store and screamed, crying, saying, I'm so sorry, but I need to feed my children.
Mm.
People are stealing to feed their children. That's how bad the economy is in Britain. So people are gambling to try and get more money. People are stealing. And we're in the 21st century. This is not the Stone Age. People
Right.
should be able to go to work full time, two people, and be able to feed their children and
Yeah.
have a comfortable lifestyle. And is that the case? It's not even remotely. If you are two people working full time in a minimum wage job and you have one child, with that income, in comparison to the cost of living, you are below the poverty line. You are worse than in poverty.
Which is insane. Yeah. It
Yes.
is insane. I even see it here right across the street. I have a convenience store and they have the gambling sign right on the window, just let you see how
Yeah.
big the jackpot is.
Hmm.
And just this year, just on one of them, we've already gone through several $billion of people buying tickets. And again, that's not all of the money. Of course, some of it goes to running the company, etc. But
Of course.
like we've already gone through billions of dollars in just 7 months.
Yes.
A few billion, and like people, and I've
Mm.
never seen it go up that fast. And
No.
I'm sure it's really not any better here. Um,
No, it's not.
the
It's not.
difference here in the town I'm in is there's a lot of um, manual labor jobs that the younger generations don't necessarily want to do, and or aren't very good at, or they don't want to learn how to get good at. And so it's a lot of middle-aged people out here that already
People don't want to
have,
get their hands dirty.
yeah, that
People don't want to
already
get
kind
their
of
hands
have a
dirty
leg
anymore.
up on stuff. So they already got a house, they already got a retirement going, they already are in a career. And like myself, I've been with the company for 10 years now, and so I don't feel, strapped for cash. Sometimes I still do, because yeah, life can be pretty
Life gets in
unforgiving.
the way, can't it?
Oh
You
yeah.
know?
But
Mm.
like I don't feel the need to gamble like I'm in a crisis and just like I hope I win because I need I need something.
I need food for the children.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
like
So
it's
you're
pretty
very
bad all
fortunate
over.
not to be in that situation, because especially in Britain, there are so many people. Food banks are at an all-time high, but the food banks can't even cope with the demand anymore. There are people who work full-time, two people, using food banks. And this is where I go back to my relation of, can people afford to keep buying these video games all the time? No, definitely not is the answer to that question.
Yeah,
And that's why I think it's relative to these companies' sales maybe not being as high as they should be, is because people can't even afford to buy food or, you know, clothes for their children.
it's
My partner
definitely.
works in a nursery, like
Oh
a
yeah,
nursery which is like a kindergarten in America, and she works with children from the age of 1 to the age of 4 before they go to school. And a lot of these children are coming in dirty clothes or shoes that are too small for them because the people can't afford to buy new clothes and shoes for these children. And this is just an absolute disgrace, in my opinion. This is the 21st century. We are not in World War II times where there's rationing and all this stuff. And all that will have an effect on the gaming industry. I know it doesn't sound relevant, but it does, because
oh it absolutely is.
money makes the world go round. And money is what buys video games. But if you haven't got money to buy food, how can you buy a video game?
Yeah,
And I think that applies with everything. People buying new cars, or people buying a new phone, or people buying new clothes. The industry, the world industry of all types, I think is suffering.
it is. It's showing up in the data for somebody
Mm.
that keeps up with public companies and what their earnings are. And I'll just keep it to gaming, but like Ubisoft and Square Enix and Embracer Group are in really big trouble
Mm.
because
Ubisoft have been around for years as well. You
yeah,
know, I
and
consider them one of the giants.
they are, yeah, they're pretty big. But
Yeah.
they've had multiple failing quarters, and they are hemorrhaging money. And this is why
Wow.
we're seeing the shifts of all of these layoffs and closing smaller subsidiary studios and canceling games. And even Ubisoft was like, well, we're going to get rid of these risky IPs, these new ones, because we don't know how they're going to do. And so instead, we're going to focus more on Assassin's Creed. And they
Mm.
have, like, for the rest of the decade, a plan of making all of the Assassin's Creed games because they know that that sells pretty good. And
Moneymaker.
they'll make smaller ones like for mobile. They'll make cheaper ones like Assassin's Creed Mirage, which are smaller, shorter stories, but you still get the experience. And then they'll also still make some really big ones like Assassin's Creed Shadows, which costs a ton of money. But again, they're not making a whole bunch of big titles anymore. They're shrinking down and trying to go with what works. But I really think if Ubisoft doesn't turn it around in a couple more years, maybe even maximum, they will have to sell to somebody. They'll
And
have
that's a shame,
Yeah, they'll
because
have to get
Ubisoft
bought.
is part of my childhood as well. I remember the am I right here? They made Splinter Cell.
Yeah, they did. They're actually
Splinter
in the
Cell was
process of
incredible.
doing a remake of one of their
Oh,
Splinter Cell games. They
wow.
are, and I think
Wow.
something I'm excited about is I'm not overly excited for Assassin's Creed Shadows, but they're for the first time they're adding new stealth mechanics in Assassin's Creed, and I
Interesting.
want to see what those mechanics are because I think Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to be the testing ground for the next Splinter
Yes.
Cell game.
Wow.
And I think they're going to see how those mechanics work, how people like them, and then they'll tweak
Mm.
stuff, and then they'll put out Splinter Cell.
Well, I don't think they can ever beat the first three that they made because they made
No.
that
Oh, I know.
they made Double Agent and that was pretty terrible. But
Yeah.
the original they made and Pandora Tomorrow and I can't remember the name of the other
Yeah.
one.
Stealth
Oh,
Refined, Pandora Tomorrow, and
um,
Chaos Theory.
Chaos Theory. Yeah. Those games were just special. I mean, that was a pioneer at the time in the industry. The only real stealth game I can remember at the time was Metal Gear Solid. But you had an
Yeah.
option to play that stealthy or not stealthy, but you had to play Splinter Cell in a stealthy way or else you would be in big trouble. And that was a revolution. I remember playing that on the original Xbox. Um, and just great games. So when you say to me a company like Ubisoft, who made that masterpiece, is struggling, that blows my mind.
Yeah. And this
Yeah.
is, this is where the trend chasing, I think, has gone, is that we have all of these companies, even big ones, making the same type and style of games and say, look, give me money. And people are saying, well, it's expensive out there, and I already spent my money on some other game. Plus, if you've already
Yes.
been progressing through a live service game, your game is going to have to be really flippin' amazing to pull people away from a game they've already been investing in to go play and
I'm one
start
of them.
investing into something else.
I'm one of them. Yeah.
It's
With
it's
like I say,
tough.
it takes something special for me to just stop playing FIFA, and that's not because I absolutely adore FIFA and it's the best thing since sliced bread. No, but for me to go and spend like when Resident Evil 4 remake come out. Now the original Resident Evil 4 was in my top five games of all time, and that came out and it was like £55 in the UK. For me to go and spend £55 on the new Resident Evil, I had to see some pretty good things, and it looked incredible. And I liked how they kept the story the same, and they'd only adjusted it graphically with a few minor tweaks. And my God, it was phenomenal. I think it sold incredibly well from what I've read, but most of Capcom stuff does anyway. Um, but yeah, you're right. The microtransaction spending that I do on FIFA, on EAFC, I don't spend as much as I used to back in the day. I used to spend serious money back in 17, 18, 19, 20. I may spend annually on FIFA less than 1,000 annually. But back comparison to say 2019 and 2020, we're talking 7 to 10 grand a year. But I've learned from my stupid mistakes. But EAFC I get quite invested in because I do spend money into it and I have to keep improving and things like that. So for me to play something other, it's got to really grab me. And so you
Yeah.
make a really good point on that. Yeah, you do. You make a really good
And
point.
and I think that's where the some companies that are hurting, and I think all of the companies in some way are hurting. Um, some certainly a lot more than others, but like they're gonna have to be like, look, we have to come up with something new. What are we gonna do?
Yes.
And
What are we gonna do?
with the reason why I loved the late 90s and why I loved the 2000s and even some of the beginning of 2010s was the innovation. And some stuff was
But I
tried and
believe the
didn't
ideas
do
were
very
there. I
good.
believe
Yeah.
the ideas were there, though. I think that there's not much they can do anymore. Do you believe that's true? Do you agree with that or not?
I think I think there's certainly been a lot of different styles that have been made or like genres of games that have been made. And I think it is harder, but I still think there's something out there. Um,
Okay.
but
I hope you're right.
yeah, me too. But like I think it'll take a change in computing power. So like to be able to go
Oh, okay.
from 2D to 3D was the foundation for all of those innovations that we had because the systems could now produce and procure so much more on the screen and put so much more out there. But I think lately we've kind of hit a plateau. Like we look at the old PlayStation 5 and Series X, they are still using some older generations of RAM, even though maybe
True.
they have a lot of RAM compared to previous generations. What you
Are
could,
they still DDR4?
I think, some of them are newer, like earlier versions of GDR5.
DDR5, are they?
Yeah.
Is it 6 that's out now?
I think 6 is soon, but there's been several iterations of DDR5. But
Okay.
still, we're also looking at different CPUs, and it's kind of like I kind of see technology as like a TV. And I think a TV is a really good example because it's like there's only so much they can continue to do to really improve it
Agreed.
for people to want to continue to spend $500 every 2 or 3 years or $1,000
Mm.
every 2 or 3 years on another TV because it's like is 8K really going to make a difference? No, the
Well,
TV.
8K isn't even selling.
Yeah, the 8K would have to be so big to make a visual difference. You can't even afford the TV at that point. And two, like
Correct.
HDR, how many more colors can you add for people to
Exactly.
really see a difference? And so I think the technology is going to have a jump somewhere. And when we finally have that jump um, in a gaming console or on PC, it just like 2D to 3D, I think it will create a new foundation for new innovation. And so I
I
think
just
we,
don't see how we can possibly go further.
yeah, I know. Well, like I didn't think 3D was ever going to be possible as a
That's
kid,
true. Yes,
and
that's true.
and
Yeah.
then when we got it, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. Or the fact that looking at PlayStation 1 or even 2 and just talking to my buddies how can they graphically make it better, but I think we've maximized graphics
You're
and
talking about a graphical standpoint, though. When I say there's nothing left they can do, I'm on about stories of games. So they can put as many characters on the
oh
screen
yeah,
and they can make it graphically as good as they want. But story-wise, what is there left for them to do? We've had survival horror's been done to death, stealth's been done to death, all that, what can they actually make that's gonna wow us? Do you know what I'm saying? And I think
yeah,
that's,
well,
again, I hate to bring it up, but The Evil Within is one of the few exceptions that I've come across in the past 10 to 12 years, but that's a long period of time. You give me one that's in the last 5 years, there isn't one.
no, there isn't one. What
And
one
this is
thing
where I think we'll struggle.